Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Simone here. So today I'm going to be filming my November wrap up, and this month has been a bit of a weird one. I've actually read 8 books this month, which is not great for me, but it's okay. But I've really kind of fallen out of love with the books I've been reading at the moment. I haven't had any 5-star books this month, which is a massive, that never happens to me ever. And most of the books I've read have been like 2, 3, like with a couple of 4 stars. So it's not been brilliant. So I'd love it if you'd leave me some recommendations, letting me know what books you've really loved this month, because I'd really like to get caught up and read more books that I'm absolutely going to love. Sorry if the lighting keeps changing, it's a bit weird. Also, just so you know, don't freak out. I know that my book nook has massively decreased. Right next to me here I have a massive bookshelf that I have built myself and put all my a lot of my books on. And I also have 2 book unhauls coming, part 1 and part 2, where I'm going to get rid of over 150 books, so that will be coming soon, so keep an eye out. But I have obviously got rid of some of the books that were on my bookshelf, like my book nooks. I will be starting my book nook tours and my bookshelf tours again. I realised I was kind of halfway through it, but yeah, so I'm going to be doing that. So again, look out for those. If you press the little notification bell once you've subscribed to my channel, if you would love to, and you'll get notifications of the books when I do book unhauls and everything like that. All the videos that I do, you'll get notifications for. I would love to see you again in the future, but before that, let's get on with my November wrap up. So the first book I read this month was Life as We Knew It by Susan Pfeffer, and this was is book 1 in the Last Survivors series, which I am looking forward to reading more of. I actually gave this book a 4-star, and it's probably my favourite book I read this month, which was right at the start of the month, which is kind of annoying. It means it's kind of gone downhill from there. But this follows a young girl called Miranda, who basically is living in a town, and they are getting ready to watch this meteor go past the Earth, and they're all really excited about it, and then it hits the moon, and it basically follows what happens, because obviously the moon is a big part of the world and how it kind of works, so everything basically breaks and things start happening, people start dying, the weather changes, and it's all about what happens after that. I thought this was really well written. It wasn't completely realistic in some ways, like I know that there are some things which are scientifically just not true, but I kind of didn't mind anyway. I felt like it was just really fun. I know a lot of people had problems with kind of how they did it. I really loved it, so I didn't really care about that. But yeah, that's probably my favourite book of the month. It's kind of like dystopian type, but it's kind of happening. You don't get many, like a lot of dystopian books where you're actually watching it as the dystopian bit happens, I guess, like the thing that changes the world. So if you've got any recommendations for those type of books, I would love to hear about them, because that's my favourite kind. And yeah, so I really liked this one. I gave it a 4-star. So the second book I read this month was kind of a bit of a fail, and it was probably my least favourite this month, so it went from my most favourite to my least pretty quickly, and it was Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. Now, I'd heard a lot about this from Joss at Scribbles Reads, and who else had talked about this? I think that might have been it actually. I've heard it kind of across the place, but I know Joss from Scribbles Reads really likes this book, and I really didn't like it. So basically it follows a woman in northern Iceland in 1829. She's been accused with 2 other people of murdering her lover, and she's been condemned to death, but until her execution date she has to live on this farm with this family who kind of have been forced to take her in until that time, and they're not happy about it, and she's kind of obviously waiting to die basically. So now, the premise of this sounded right up my street. I was really excited to read it. I couldn't wait, really wanted to. But the writing of this, like, I know a lot of people think it's beautiful, like beautiful writing, but I think maybe that's just not the type of book I like to read, books that are kind of lyrically written, I guess. This also is written, because it's written in Icelandic originally, maybe? I think. I'm not really sure, maybe not actually, but the names in this are very Icelandic, and the writing is quite of that style, and I just didn't get on with it. I really didn't like the writing style. I finished it, but I wasn't excited to finish it, like I was just trying to get through it, and it took me quite a while to do that, so definitely not a fan of this one, and I don't know if I'll read any more books by her. I don't know, maybe, but I didn't like this one. I gave that book a 2-star, just to say I don't think I said. And then the next book I read was also a 2-star read, which I was really disappointed by, and that is According to Yes by Dawn French. In my library haul, which I'll link below, I said I was really excited to read this because I've loved the other books by Dawn French. I've read Dear Sylvia and A Tiny Bit Marvellous, I think the other one is, and I've also read Dawn French's autobiography because I adore Dawn French. I think she's so funny, she's so lovely. I've seen interviews with her, I think she's amazing, and I loved her other books, and I just thought this is obviously going to be a book I love, and I really didn't like it. This basically follows a young woman who moves to New York after breaking up with her boyfriend, and she essentially moves to New York in order to become a nanny for this family, like a well-to-do family in Upper East Side in Manhattan. And she moves into this family that kind of have their own rule book without it being said. Like, it doesn't need to be said, but everybody follows this rule book. Now she moves into this place without having read that rule book basically, and changes everything and tries to like do all these things that she probably shouldn't be doing. And I would have liked this, but it was so far-fetched. Like, I don't want to spoil it, but the relationship that she has with 3 members of this family is very odd. I really didn't like it. I thought it was really strange, and I could tell what was coming as soon as it happened. And it was funny because I said to my friend at work, I was like, this is definitely going to happen, and then I said to her, this happened. And then at the end you never actually get an answer, which is one of my least favourite things in books. Like, I need a wrap up at the end of the book that tells me what happened and why it happened. I don't want like an open-ended guess yourself, like make up your own decision. Like, that's annoying. So it was unrealistic to me and I just didn't like it, so unfortunately I gave this a 2-star and I'm really sad about it. The next book I read this month was Agent 21 by Chris Ryan. Now, I really liked this book actually. I gave it a 3-star. It was okay. It wasn't like the best book I've ever read, but it kept my attention while I was reading it. And this is about a young boy named Zach Dark, whose parents are killed in this massive unexplained mass murder, and so he is orphaned. And he moves in with his uncle and aunt, I believe, and cousin. And he moves in with his aunt, uncle and cousin, and he's just not really loving life at that point. The bin men have decided to empty the bins right at this very moment. Suddenly his life changes forever and he becomes Agent 21, and he doesn't know what happened to the agents before him, but they're all very young from what he knows, and he then gets put into this kind of training that he has to do in order to be this agent. And I really liked this. Like I said, it wasn't mind-blowing, but it was interesting, it was quite fun. I have decided I'm not going to continue the series. I'm quite happy of reading this as a kind of single book on its own. It hasn't interested me enough to make me want to read the rest, and I believe there's quite a few of them, but I'm interested anyway, and yeah, I'm really glad I read it because I think Chris Ryan is an author that I don't really enjoy that much often, so I'm quite glad that I read a book by him and I did enjoy it. The next book I'm really excited about because I finally finished it. It has only taken me about 3 months. I've been listening to the audiobook, which was about 34 hours long, and I did give this book 4 stars because I did like it, and it is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. Now, as you can see, it's a huge book. It's about 780 pages long, and I did really like this actually. I quite surprised myself. I tried to start reading this. I read about 50 pages myself before I read it on audio, and it just wasn't going into my brain. I think because, like I think I've mentioned before, I don't really read high fantasy very often, and this is obviously massively high fantasy. There are so many characters. Like, the end of the book has like all of the characters listed. There are so many of them, and it wasn't going in, so I decided to read the audiobook, which I feel like often gives the feeling of like a TV show because you kind of hear it and you hear the people talking and things. So yeah, I really, really liked this. If you don't know what this is about, it follows a myriad of characters who are kind of living in this world where there is a king on the Iron Throne and people are kind of fighting amongst themselves, and it's just great. yeah, it's cold, it's winter there. There's not a lot else I can really say. It's really, really good. I do think I will continue the rest of the series. There are lots of them. I think there's like 7. I also think I might continue listening to the audiobooks though, because I think that if I tried to read it, I would get a bit confused. Although now I know the characters, maybe I wouldn't get as confused. Also, I don't think I'm going to watch the TV series. Now I know you might shout at me. I'm sure someone's shouting at me out there. But I like the books, and I know that the books are completely different to the series, so maybe once I've read all of the books I might go back and watch the TV series, but I don't really want to read that. Like, I don't have any compulsion to read, like, to see the TV series right now. I like the books, so I'm probably just going to stick with that. But let me know what you think I should do. The next book I read this month was The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight by Jennifer E. Smith. This was a very short book. It was about 200 pages. Didn't take me very long to read at all. And I actually really liked this. I thought it was going to be a bit too cheesy for me, because I've heard that Jennifer E. Smith's writing is quite cheesy in general, but actually I really did like it. It's about our main character, 17-year-old Hadley Sullivan, who basically misses her flight to London from New York to go to her dad's wedding, and she manages to get onto another flight and ends up meeting a boy named Oliver. She ends up sitting near on the plane, and they kind of talk and they get to know each other, and then when she gets to London, they kind of miss each other in the queue, and then they kind of lose each other, and she doesn't know his surname, and then it's kind of a flee across London to try to find him and kind of meet each other again, kind of. And I really liked this. Again, it was kind of unrealistic. Like, I don't think that this would have happened in real life, but it was really sweet. It wasn't too sickly either. It wasn't like gross. Also, I know a lot of people might think that this is insta love, but I kind of don't, because I don't think that they're in love with each other. Like, I think that they understand each other, and I think that's different. I think that, yeah, I just really liked this. I don't think it was too insta-lovey, which I generally do. There's no love triangles or anything like that in this book, which I think could quite easily have been the case. And I really liked the relationships between the parents and the children in this. Like, it was really interesting, and yeah, I really liked this, and I gave it a 4-star. Then I read the book that I was dreading, and that is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, the first book in the Ender's Saga series. I will not be continuing this series, but I didn't mind it at the time when I was reading it. It did go very slowly. I did feel like in the middle there was a big section where I was just getting bored, because I was like, is anything actually going to happen? But basically this follows Ender Wiggin, who is a young boy. I think he's about 6 at the beginning of this, and he enters this training program to be like a battle commander, I guess, against the Buggers. Why there is like an alien called the Buggers, and that was even allowed, but God knows. But basically things happen, and it's a long story. Anyway, I did like this. It was alright. It was not my favourite, but I was quite like, I think I mentioned before, I definitely mentioned before in the library haul, which I will have linked below for the other one. I don't like Orson Scott Card as a person. He said a lot of horrible things, a lot of very, very prejudiced things, and homophobic things, and so I didn't want to read his book really, but everybody had read it and said it was great, so I was kind of like, right, I want to see what this is about. And I don't love it, so I'm not going to continue reading it. I've decided it was okay, so I will leave it as the 1, and again, not bother again. But I gave this one a 3-star. The last book I read this month was the first book from my Stand Up to the TBR video, which I will also link below, which is a new series I'm starting, where I'm taking the oldest books on my Goodreads and I'm getting them out of the library and reading them. So this is the first book of that series that's coming up, and this is Truth Witch by Susan Dennard, which is the first book in the Witchlands series. I'm not quite sure how many books there are in the series. I think there's at least 2 out at the minute, but I think there's a 3rd coming as well. This follows 2 young witches named Safia and Isolt, I believe is how you pronounce her name, and they are basically running away from these other witches and evil people, and it's about them. Basically, Safia is a truth witch, which means that she can use her powers to tell when somebody is telling a lie, and Isolt is a thread witch, which means she can see people's life threads, so she can see how people are feeling and their emotions, and people are basically following them and they are trying to use their powers in order to escape capture. I really liked this book. I gave this a 4-star. It's not the type of book I usually would read, but I'm actually really getting into YA fantasy recently. Like I loved Assassin's Blade, and I feel like this is the type of book I'm going to really start enjoying, so I'm hoping that there are more of them on my Stand Up to the TBR list. Yeah, like I said, really liked this book. I think the romance in this was brilliant. Like, it was really well written. It wasn't insta-lovey, it wasn't too much, like it wasn't over the top, but really, really good. Really liked this, and I would definitely recommend, and I can't wait to continue reading this series. And I'm so glad that I decided to do this Stand Up to the TBR series, because it's made me read a book that I'm really glad I read, and I own it now because I actually bought this book, so really excited. So that is the 8 books that I read this month. Let me know if you've read any of those books and what you thought of them, and leave a comment in the description down below and let me know what books you read this month and what you think I should read soon. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I shall see you in my next video. Bye guys!